Welcome on back, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Footy podcast. This is episode 43, and today is our round 19 review. Another big weekend of football, 9 matches played, big wins, big losses, a lot of very important games in terms of who makes finals and who will miss out. So we'll be jumping straight into the games in a minute, but as always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on the weekend's football. Also, don't forget to check out all the social medias. There's plenty. There's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. So go check them out. And as always, this podcast is releasing on YouTube and Spotify on Mondays and Fridays. So we'll jump straight into the first match of the weekend. It was Friday night footy. It was the Bombers versus the Crows at Marvel Stadium. Big game for the Bombers. Crows season probably is over already before this one, but they upset the Dons with a 2-point victory. It was a weird sort of game, I guess, in a lot of ways. Bombers looked alright early. Crows had a massive second quarter where they kicked about 8 goals in a row and just turned the game on its head. Then, late in the second, early in the third, the Bombers turned it back on and took the lead, and with about 7 minutes to go, they were 3 goals clear. It looked all over, but the Crows turned it back on and kicked 3 goals in the last 5 minutes or so to win the game by 2 points. Thanks to a goal with about a minute to go. 52 seconds were on the clock when Rochelle put one through the big sticks to put them in front. The Bombers had a couple late chances at goal, but were unable to convert and ended up just being a couple rushed behinds. What does this mean? I don't know. Crows, obviously, we said their season's probably over, but this is the second time they've beaten a big Victorian team at Marvel this year. It's a little bit concerning that now this is 2 years in a row that they've basically done this exact same thing, where they have these good signs where they show that they're good enough to match it with the top teams, but then they're just going to miss finals, which is what they did last year, which wasn't entirely their own fault, but it seems like another waste of a season for the Crows. And yeah, they need to find a way next year to not be missing out by finals by a couple of positions. Bombers, they're still well and truly in finals contention. It's a costly loss, one that does grow a couple concerns about what happened last year to them, but they've got a couple winnable games over the next couple of weeks. They need to probably win 2 of the next 3 for sure, in my opinion, but they're not the toughest games, so I'd expect to see them win them. I look at these stats from the game. Bombers their defensive efficiency probably was the worst thing. Adelaide really were converting their forward attempts. Bombers were +7 inside 50s, as they tend to do. They tend to win the inside 50 count most weeks. Their forward efficiency is never great, and it was around about their average this weekend. So around similar numbers for them in that regard. Their defensive efficiency, though, was worse than usual. They were good out of the middle, out of the stoppages. Both teams were pretty even in that area, which isn't too surprising. Both teams not the greatest, but also not the worst in clearance game. Contested footy, Bombers dominated. Tackling, Bombers dominated. They just couldn't convert it into the best of opportunities. And in the end, Adelaide probably, with 10 minutes to go, probably were disappointed that they were 3 goals down and looking like losing a game that they were definitely a chance. It was pretty even across the board for both teams. I think Bombers overall, though, will be the most disappointed from this game, because they certainly looked like they had it won, and in the end they didn't. So it puts them right into the congestion of trying to make finals. They certainly can still make it. There's no doubt about that, but it is what it is. Best players, I think Ben Keays was clearly the best player. He had 22 touches, 5 goals. He was outstanding. 8 tackles as well, 2 goal assists. He was fantastic all game long. Rochelle kicked 3, including the last one. Fogarty kicked 4, so 12 out of Adelaide's 17 goals came between those 3. For the Bombers, Langford kicked a couple, as well as 22 touches, which is a very big number for him. He wouldn't get 22 touches in a game too often. Zach Merritt, as always, was very good, 30 touches and a goal, and almost got the centre clearance that won him the game back in the last minute. I don't know what to say about the Bombers though. They lose this one, should have won it, but in the end they don't. And it kind of, they're still in the 8. They're sitting exactly 8th. Their percentage is still a concern, but obviously they have that draw, so it's not really a concern, because unless they end up equal with Fremantle and Brisbane on wins. But the fact that now Bulldogs, Melbourne and Hawthorn are all only half a game behind Essendon. 3 teams right behind them trying to get that spot in the finals. So Bulldogs came off a great win. Melbourne obviously lost, but Hawthorn are also in great form. So it's going to be really interesting to see who makes finals football over the final 5 weeks. GWS played Gold Coast on Saturday afternoon. This was GWS home game, so as that tells you, if you've been watching football this year, Gold Coast lost. Were they the worst team on the ground? Not at all. They should have won this. They've only got themselves to blame. 6 goals, 14, and it's worse than it looks. Just unbelievable that Gold Coast lose this game. They haven't won at home. They have won at home. They've won every game at home. They haven't won an away game yet this year. And it just makes no sense that they didn't win this one. They were plus 19 inside 50s, plus 13 clearances, plus 4 contested footy. Had all the opportunities. They defended well. They just could not score. Well, they could score. They couldn't kick a goal, more to the point. That was their biggest issue here. 6 goals, 14. You're going to struggle to win games of football. Meanwhile, GWS got the job done, 14-5. Wasn't the most impressive game of their season. A lot of things for them to work on, I guess, from this game. But in the end, it was just... they got away with it, I guess. In the end, Gold Coast just shot themselves in the foot, as it's not the first time they've done it this year, and it probably won't be the last, let's be honest. Where does this sit, both teams? GWS, it puts them in 5th and only half a game outside the top 4. As I said, it wasn't their best win, but it was enough to get them the win and get them through. They're only a game inside the 8, so they're certainly not safe yet. A big game this weekend coming up against Melbourne. If they win that, then they probably are looking very, very good for finals. If they lose this week, Melbourne will be level with them on wins. They'll be above them. GWS will be above Melbourne on percentage, but it will certainly tighten it up if that's the case. Gold Coast, another away loss. They've only got, I think, 2 more home games this year, so 2 wins, and you probably expect that they lose the other 3 being away games. The issue for them this week is a home game against Brisbane, which won't be easy. Brisbane obviously also play Queensland football, so it won't be the easiest of wins for them, but they need to win it if there are any hope of making finals this year, which, let's be honest, is probably unlikely at the moment. Best players on this one, I don't know who was the best players, to be honest. A lot of big ball winners. Lucky Whitfield had 40 touches, 780 metres gained, so he was huge in that regard. Tom Green was really good, 34 touches. Sam Flanders continued his fine season. He had 43. Goal kickers, Jesse Hogan kicked 4 again. After this game, he had tied the Coleman, but Charlie Curnow then got back in front after because Carlton played on Sunday. Lukosius 2, Toby Green 2, and Brent Daniels 2. Next game on the weekend was St Kilda hosting the Eagles at Marvel Stadium. Saturday afternoon football. This game kind of went as expected in most ways. West Coast unable to score, 6 goals, 541. Whereas St Kilda scored a bit more than they usually would, but this is like the perfect opportunity to score, I guess. They kicked 17, 11, 113. Dominated pretty much every facet of the game. Plus 30 inside 50s. Had a lot more shots, obviously. Plus 8 clearances, which were all centre clearances. So dominated out of the centre. Plus 29 contested possessions. Plus 28 uncontested football. Plus 21 tackles. Plus 8 intercept turnover. So it was just a flat out domination. Whenever a team wins possession, contested football, uncontested football, and tackle count, they're not going to lose many games. So St Kilda absolutely thrashed this one. West Coast have really struggled since the bye, and this was another poor performance in that regard from them. What else is there to say about these two teams? St Kilda's seasons, they're too far back, let's be honest. If Adelaide are too far back, then St Kilda are too far back. Technically, they're not, but it's pretty much impossible. They would need to win every game to be a chance, and even then, that's very unlikely. West Coast, their season has been long gone for a little bit, and it doesn't get better for them. They've got Fremantle this week, who obviously they beat earlier this year, so I'm not going to rule them out here of this game, but the way they're playing at the moment, I don't think they can get within 100 points of Fremantle. If we're being honest, I think West Coast are probably the team currently playing the worst football in the competition. They're just, really struggling to find much at the moment. Best players, Tim Membry, 23 touches, 5 goals, was outstanding. Mason Wood had 19 touches and 3 goals. It was just a game dominated by St Kilda, to be honest. Marshall was huge, 26 touches, 10 clearances, 24 hit-outs. He was really good. But best players were all St Kilda. And not much to write home about for West Coast in any facet of this game. Jack Williams kicked 3 out of their 6, so I guess that's a positive. But, tough day for the Eagles. Next up was what looked like a massive game and a very important game. Hawthorn Collingwood, MCG, both teams fighting to keep their seasons alive, and Hawthorn absolutely smashed Collingwood pretty much in every facet of this one. It was a wet game. It started pretty dry for the first quarter and a half, and then it teamed down for the rest, and Hawthorn just controlled the game in every facet. Half-time, it was 50-17. It should have been probably closer. Collingwood wasted a lot of opportunities, kicked 1 goal, 11. But the third and fourth quarters, Hawthorn were just the much better team. Collingwood kicked a lot straighter in the second half, kicking 8 goals, 2. But they just could not stop Hawthorn from controlling play, who kicked 13-5 in the second half. Ended up winning it 133-67 in what is Hawthorn's best win of the season, and Collingwood's worst loss of the season, and probably their worst loss in 3 seasons since 2021, I would say. The one thing that Collingwood, the one shining light was their forward efficiency. They didn't get the ball forward often, but they did manage to turn their inside 50s into shots very regularly. But Hawthorn just dominated it. Plus 32 inside 50s. It was just uncontested footy. They controlled it. From start all the way to finish, Collingwood couldn't get their hands on the ball, couldn't control the ball, couldn't do anything. Turned it over a lot and just just got thrashed in pretty much every facet. If you look there, Collingwood's disposal efficiency 59.7. Yes, it was a wet weather game, but that would be the lowest rating of any team this season by quite a long way. And when you compare that to Hawthorn, who went at 72.4%, it's a massive difference. Hawthorn just controlled uncontested footy and didn't turn it over. Looked after the footy, and that was the game. Collingwood just couldn't get the ball, and you have to wonder what's happened to them, really. But it's been a long season for them. They're really struggling and limping their way home at the moment. It's very much impossible for them to make finals based on what we've seen lately. Puts them a game and a half outside the 8 and probably done, whereas Hawthorn puts them only half a game outside the 8. Unfortunately, the percentage is lower than most of the teams that they're fighting for a spot. So at the moment they're level on wins with Melbourne and Bulldogs, only just down on percentage on Melbourne, so they can gain that back, whereas they're a long way behind on percentage on the Doggies. So if they want to finish above the Dogs, they have to win more games than the Bulldogs. Bombers obviously are half a game in front of Hawthorn, and then teams one game ahead of them are Port Adelaide, Geelong and GWS, who are all pretty comfortably ahead in percentage. Not massively, so like one big win or one big loss either way could change that pretty quickly. But a lot of the teams are fighting with they're below on percentage, so they do probably need to win that extra game than some of the other teams around them. But from what we've seen, they're every chance to. They've got Adelaide this week coming, so that's a big game for them. If they can knock off Adelaide in Adelaide, I'm pretty sure it is, it'll be huge for their final chances. But Adelaide have ruined one team's final, well, not ruined it completely, but certainly put a little dampener on one finals contender last weekend. So will they do it again this weekend? I guess we'll see on the weekend. Best players, it's hard to go past Guinea. He had 31 touches, 2 goals against his old club. He was everywhere. 31 touches for him is huge. Nick Watson was huge. He had 3 goals. Bruce McDonald kicked 4 goals each. It was just a dominant display from everyone on the Hawthorn team, to be honest. We probably had the 10 best players on the ground, if we're being completely honest. Next up was Saturday night footy. First one was at the Cattery, Geelong Bulldogs. Another game where both teams fighting for final spots, and a big win for the Doggies. Geelong did not turn up in this one. They had 2 goalless quarters. Didn't kick a goal in the first quarter, didn't kick a goal in the last quarter. Kicked 7 goals, 2 across the second and third quarter. So those 2 quarters were okay, but they started poorly, finished poorly, and ended up losing comfortably by 47 points in a wet evening game at the Cattery. Looking at the stats, obviously disposal efficiency was down low. I know I said Collingwood's was the lowest, but Geelong's was actually lower than Collingwood's, but Bulldogs was also lower than Hawthorn, so biggest discrepancy was Collingwood. And this one, Bulldogs controlled uncontested footy. They also controlled contested footy, tackles, centre clearances. Stoppage clearances went the way of the Cats, but first ball was always pretty much going for the Doggies. They end up plus 22 inside 50s, which they do kind of tend to dominate territory battle most weeks, and this was no exception to that. Forward efficiency was outstanding from the Bulldogs, as was their defensive efficiency. They just kind of did everything right, and meanwhile Geelong did everything wrong. The one area that the Bulldogs struggled with was their goal kicking. 13-17, not outstanding, but in the end they won the game comfortably, so it's not the biggest loss. It did look a lot worse at 3/4 time when they were 8-15, so they managed to kick 5 goals, 2 in the last quarter to make their goal kicking look a little bit more respectable for the Doggies. Where does that sit these teams? Bulldogs are ninth, half a game outside the 8, and a win next week. Granted, they are playing top of the ladder Sydney, but a win next week would put them right in finals. Meanwhile, a loss would have them half a game to a game, maybe outside the 8, and, well, more than half a game, at least a game, maybe a game and a half outside the 8, and in trouble of making finals. Meanwhile, for the Cats, they're still in the 8, they're 6th on the ladder, but they're now only a game ahead of the Bulldogs, Melbourne, Hawthorn, and the Bulldogs have a better percentage, the other two teams don't, but it certainly doesn't help their season. They'd won 3 in a row before this week, so they were pushing towards top 4. It's still a very good chance to make top 4. They have North Melbourne this week, so they should bounce back, and they will want to be bouncing back. If they want to make top 4, they need to win this week, and probably win it comfortably enough to get their confidence up. They also want to probably extend their percentage on Port Adelaide a little bit. Best players from this game: Treloar had 31 touches, 3 goals. He was huge. Ed Richards continued his fine season. He's been really good since his workload in the middle's probably increased. He's had 29 touches, 2 goals. Ugle Hagen kicked 4. I think that's 2 weeks in a row he's kicked 4. So he's been really good for them over the last fortnight or so. Bond had 27 touches. He was good. Probably won't get in the votes this week, but he was good enough. For Geelong, Tom Stewart had 26 and a goal, but all the best players were Bulldogs. There's no doubt about that. They were the better team on the day and got the win. Next game up, Port Adelaide Richmond over in Adelaide, Saturday night footy. Kind of went the way you'd expect. Richmond probably put up a better fight for 3 quarters than maybe we would expect of them. They were only 10 points down at 3-quarter time, but Port Adelaide turned it on in the last quarter, kicking 4 goals, 8-0-1. In the end, 16-20, 116 to 11-9-75. Looks like a reasonably comfortable win for the Port Adelaide Footy Club. Certainly wasn't as comfortable as perhaps they would have liked. Plus 20 inside 50s for Port Adelaide. They did dominate the territory battle. They dominated the clearance battle. They dominated contested footy, uncontested footy, tackles, turnovers. They dominated the whole game except for the scoreboard pressure. Really, Richmond stayed in with them, but in the end, they kicked away as you'd expect them to, and got the win, which is important for them. Richmond, they're just limping towards the end of the season. These sort of games don't matter too much for them. Best players in this one, Daniel Rioli was Richmond's best. He had 28 touches, 2 goals. For Port Adelaide, Charlie Dixon kicked 4. What else did we have? Ollie Wines had a lot of it, 32 touches. But I don't know. It wasn't the most outstanding game from Port Adelaide. Rose was solid, 24 touches, 2 goals. What does that mean for these two teams? Port Adelaide not only keep their finals chances alive, keep their maybe slight top 4 chances alive. I don't think they're good enough for top 4 this year, but we'll see. They have a massive game this weekend coming up. They play Carlton, which is in Melbourne. They lost the corresponding game in Adelaide earlier on in the year, so it's going to be tough for them to beat Carlton in Melbourne. But they probably need to if they want to play finals. While their season won't be over if they lose this week, they potentially will still be in the top 8 after the round, even if they lose. It's the sort of game that they kind of need to win, just to show that they are good enough to compete with the top 8 team, or the top 4 teams really. Meanwhile, Richmond, they're bottom of the ladder. It's probably where they stay, maybe. They've got Collingwood this week, which the way Collingwood are playing wouldn't be the most outrageous thing to predict a Richmond victory, to be honest. But Their percentage is only just behind North Melbourne, so maybe there's a chance that they still finish above North or even West Coast. If both North and Richmond win a game, then they could both jump West Coast, because West Coast are not playing great football at the moment. But yes, they are just limping towards the end of the season. They've got 5 games left, and they'll be looking forward to getting through them as quickly as possible. We move on to the Sunday games. This wasn't the first one, so we'll go to this one first, because this was actually the first of the Sunday games. It was Brisbane-Sydney at the Gabba. Big game. I think it was, first versus fourth on the ladder, something like that. Sydney go down again, 77-79. That's 3 out of 4 games now that they've lost. Not biggest concern. I've mentioned it many times. You just look back to Collingwood last year. Collingwood lost 3 out of 5 going into finals. Managed to turn it around when it mattered and won the premiership. I can see Sydney doing the same, but they need to find a way to probably get themselves back into their best form. It was always going to be a tough game. Brisbane at the Gabba. Brisbane are in some really, really good form. Brisbane hurt themselves here with their accuracy, but overall it was pretty even contest. I think Brisbane were the better team on the day. They kicked 5 goals to 1 in the first quarter and looked like they were going to cruise away. Sydney fought back and had the lead by half time, but then, and even three-quarter time, Sydney looked like they were going to now win comfortably. They were 15 points up and had kicked 8 goals to 2 since quarter time. But Brisbane turned it back on in the last, got the lead. Sydney got the lead, back and forward footy. Brisbane ended up in front and get the win. They've dominated most areas of the game, except for the scoreboard, I guess, and that's mainly due to their poor kicking. They were very good at creating shots, just not quite so good at kicking the goals. In the end, though, they got the win. Huge win for them. But as I said, Sydney is still comfortably on top, so it's not the biggest issue. If we look at the ladder, Sydney are still 2 games clear in first, plus a heap of percentage. So with 5 weeks to go, it's very unlikely that they drop out of top spot. Brisbane, this puts them in 3rd on the ladder, only half a game behind Carlton still, equal on points with Fremantle. Similar percentage between those two, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with those 2 teams going forward. Brisbane play Gold Coast this week, massive game for both teams. If Brisbane win it, they are not going to lock in a top 4 spot, but you'd find it hard to see them missing a top 4. And then for Sydney, they play the Bulldogs in a game where all of a sudden it's becoming more and more important for them. And a game that you could see the Bulldogs winning, to be honest. If Bulldogs play like they did this weekend, Bulldogs might be able to upset them as well. And they just need to try and find a way to, I guess, resurrect their momentum a little bit. Best players in this one. McCluggage had 26 touches, 3 goals. Sorko had a lot of it again. He's been very good of late. For the Swans, Goulden, 27 and a goal. Some of the other big names in their midfield, maybe not as good as usual. Heaney only had 19 touches. Judd Warner, 20 touches and a goal. So their midfield's just a little bit down on form at the moment. And maybe that's a reason why they're struggling a little bit. Just need to get their way back into form, I guess. The form that they showed early on in the season. Next up, game number 8 of the weekend. Fremantle Melbourne. It was over in Freo. And the scoreboard says 116-66. But if you had told me watching this game that the final score was 200-15, I wouldn't have been surprised. It was as dominant a display as you'll see. Fremantle absolutely demolished them, which they did last time they played them as well. They played in Alice Springs about 8-9 weeks ago, and Freo won that one by 92 points. And there was a point early in the second quarter that I thought that they were going to win by 100 again. It was incredible domination. Clearance differential plus 31. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a bigger differential in clearances. It is the best clearance team against one of the, I'm not going to say the worst, but they're in the bottom 5 teams in clearances, I think, the Demons. So it's not that surprising that Fremantle won the clearance count quite comfortably, but plus 31 is unreal. I think at one point it was 14-0. Just an absolute domination. Centre clearances, dominated. Stoppage clearances, dominated. As well as contested football, uncontested football, inside 50 differential. They turned it over a bit more, but had them all the ball. Like, they just had the ball all the time. Melbourne just couldn't control it, couldn't get their first hands on the ball at any point of this match. Freo made plenty of chances, did what they had to do, defended really well as they always do. They have one of the best defensive teams in the league. In fact, I would put them as the best defensive team in the league, and their offense is growing and growing each week. I have been on the bandwagon a little bit of late. Obviously, they did lose last week against Hawthorn, but that was down in Tassie. I wouldn't stress too much about that. There's a good chance that Fremantle finish top 4. There's also a sort of chance that they will finish top 2, depending on what happens, I guess, with Carlton for the rest of the year. But they're only half a game behind Carlton. They're level on points with Brisbane. If they do manage a top 2, they get a home qualifying final, win that, home prelim final, they are a sneaky chance to make a grand final. They could also fall apart and finish 7th on the ladder, get knocked out first week of the finals. But I think they're good enough from what they've been doing of recent weeks to be a contender this year. A grand final at the MCG against anyone is not going to be easy for them, but they have played in Melbourne a lot better this year than they have in previous years, so it's not the end of the world for them. Best players in this one, Caleb Sarong. He's had a great season, let's be honest. He had 36 touches and a goal. He was really good. Andrew Brayshaw, he's had a great season as well. He had 41 touches. Tracy kicked 3 goals from 18 touches. Hayden Young, I think, was really good with 28 touches. I like the way he goes about it. 4 goals for Michael Walters in what possibly is his best game of the season. For Melbourne, there's not too many shining lights. Van Rooyen kicked 2 goals from 17 touches. Stephen May had a lot of it, but that's not a good sign when one of your key backmen is getting your most disposals in a match, let's be honest. But, they're the best players. As I said, Freo, they're in the top 4 at the moment, and they're a chance to go on. They have a big game against the Eagles this week. If they win this one, they really cement themselves as a top 4 contender this year. Meanwhile, Melbourne, they're sitting 10th on the ladder. They're only half a game outside the 8. Their season's not done, but they have a massive game this week. They need to beat GWS. If they lose to GWS this weekend, you can probably say that they're not going to make finals. Well, they still could make finals. There's 5 games left. They would have to win 4 of them, you'd think, if they wanted to play finals. One last game of the weekend. It was Sunday. Oh, not that one. Sunday evening. Carlton, North Melbourne, Marvel Stadium. What to say about this? North Melbourne, they have shown some really positive signs since the bye. Carlton haven't been in the best form. They still, as I've harped on about week in, week out, and probably everybody's sick of hearing, need to work on their defence. Conceding 88 against North Melbourne is not the best. It's about their average defence, but their last month they've conceded some big scores. So they still need to tidy that up a bit. Their defensive efficiency was really good in this game, but they just gave up the territory battle for big periods of the game. North Melbourne ended up +3 inside 50s, which North Melbourne are a team that usually lose the inside 50 count by 15 plus. So that's huge for North Melbourne. and their development just showing some really good signs. I'm not hugely confident in North Melbourne just yet, but they're showing signs that next year there's no reason why they can't end up on 10 plus wins for the season based on what we've seen since the bye. If they can bring that sort of form into the start of next year, maybe they're a chance to finally start showing something. Meanwhile, Carlton, they did what they needed to. They just needed to win. There's no two ways about it. They just needed to win. They won the turnover game massively. They did what they needed to after 2 losses in a row, and they get the win. And they come up against Port Adelaide this week with a chance to win 2 in a row. They win that. They set themselves up as a genuine top 2 contender this year. And which you need to do this year. It's all going to be, I feel like it's just going to be who's in form going into finals. Those last 2 or 3 weeks, getting your team right, making sure you have no injuries, and just building that confidence up is going to be huge in terms of who wins the premiership this year, I think. And Carlton, at the moment, they're certainly building the blocks to give themselves a chance at it. North Melbourne 17th on the ladder. I can see them winning a game in the run home. I don't know which one it'll be. They've got Geelong next week, so it's not going to be easy that week. But they're playing some really good football. They've only had the one bad game since their bye, which was last weekend against Sydney in Sydney. So, I mean, that's an acceptable bad game, I guess. But every other game they've been really competitive. So, positive signs from North. Carlton, they got the job done, did what they needed to. Best players in this one. Curnow kicked 4 goals, which puts him 4 goals clear in the Coleman medal. You'd have to think he's probably going to win that one. Paddy Cripps had 29 touches. But I think Sheasel was probably best on ground. He had 35 touches, 2 goals. He was very good. And the more football he gets, the more football he plays, the better he'll become. He's going to be an absolute star. Zeri was best. Tristan Zeri was the best ruckman on the ground. He had 11 clearances, which is a huge number for a ruckman. And yeah, Paul Curtis kicked 3 goals, but overall, Carlton were the better team, got the job done, did what they needed to, and sets up their final 5 games as a real genuine chance to finish top 2. Host a home final with Melbourne against potentially like a Brisbane or a Fremantle, and they could be hosting a home prelim. Huge opportunity for Carlton this season. We'll now have a look at how my tips went on the weekend. Wasn't as good as last week. Last week we got 9 of 9, so we dropped off a little bit this week. We got off to a bad start because Adelaide upset the Bombers, which we didn't exactly predict. I did say in the podcast that it wasn't against the Bombers a possibility. I did say that some ghosts might appear into Essendon's memory bank from last year if they were to lose against the Crows, which they did, but that's neither here nor there. So we got that one wrong. We then did okay Saturday afternoon. We got Giants right, we got St Kilda right, and we got Hawthorn correct. We got the Geelong one wrong. I did think that the Bulldogs were a slight chance just due to how good they were last time they played them, which was at Adelaide Oval Gather Round, which was match of that weekend and maybe one of the matches of the season. This one wasn't as good of a game, but the Bulldogs certainly played very well. We got Port Adelaide right. We got Sydney wrong. I was debating between those 2 teams all weekend long. I got it wrong. We got Freo right, and obviously we got Carlton right. Gave us 6 out of 9, gives us 106 on the season, which isn't too bad. We started okay. We dropped off there for a little bit through the bye rounds and that sort of period. We really struggled to get some winners. Last 2 weeks have been a bit better. Last week 9 of 9, this week 6 of 9. So not too bad, but that is how it is. That is round 19 wrapped up. Coming up this week, we're going to have another video come out on the YouTube channel in the next few days. It will be a run home video for pretty much everybody in contention. So I'll probably do from Bulldogs down to Collingwood, maybe. Just their run home. Technically, Collingwood can still make finals if they were to win all 5 games. I don't see it happening though. But we'll probably put them in the video as well. So, second down to 13. Obviously, Sydney have made finals. We might put them in there as well and just see how many wins they end up on. But yeah, that video will be coming out on YouTube on Wednesday. And then other than that, there'll be the next podcast episode, round 20 preview, coming out on Friday, and plenty of other content on all my social media. So go check them all out. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Every interaction helps, as always. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch us on the next one.